Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, April 4th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. Today in Riverside, we are expecting a high of 80.3 degrees and a low of 53.7 degrees. As we look at the headlines, we are investigating why the United States claims regarding complete air superiority in Iranian airspace are being met with intense skepticism. Additionally, we are exploring the mounting pressure on Southern California Edison in the wake of the latest wildfire incidents. These major topics, plus a wide array of other important stories, will be discussed as we keep you updated throughout the show. We have a packed program ahead, so make sure to keep it right here for the full details on these developments. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We begin this morning with major developments out of the Middle East, where Operation Epic Fury is now in its fifth week. 2 American combat aircraft were shot down over Iran yesterday, marking the most significant U.S. aerial losses since this joint campaign with Israel began on February 28th. Ethan has been tracking all of this for us. Ethan, walk us through what happened yesterday.
So Friday was a really tough day for U.S. forces in the region. According to The Guardian and Al Jazeera, Iran's military intercepted 2 American warplanes within roughly the same window. The first was an F-15E Strike Eagle from the 494th Fighter Squadron, based out of RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom. It went down over rugged terrain in southwestern Iran. Then, separately, an A-10 Thunderbolt, the plane a lot of folks know as the Warthog, was hit by hostile fire near the Strait of Hormuz.
Iranian state media initially said they'd taken down an F-35. Was that accurate?
It was not. Aviation experts cited by The Guardian confirmed the wreckage actually belonged to that Strike Eagle. Iran's claim about an F-35 appears to have been either a misidentification or deliberate propaganda. It's worth noting the F-15E is a 2-seat aircraft, so there was a pilot and a weapons systems officer on board. That distinction matters a lot for what's unfolding right now.
So what happened to the crews of both planes?
The Strike Eagle's pilot was pulled out in a high-risk rescue deep inside Iranian territory. We're talking U.S. Special Operations Forces, HH-60 Pavehawk helicopters, HC-130 refueling aircraft, the whole package. However, the weapons systems officer is still missing. As for the A-10 pilot, CBS News and The Washington Post report that pilot managed to nurse the crippled plane toward Kuwaiti airspace before ejecting. Maritime assets in the Persian Gulf picked that pilot up, and the individual is now in stable condition.
That missing weapons systems officer is clearly the urgent concern right now. What do we know about the search?
It's become the Pentagon's top immediate priority. The Guardian and Sunday Guardian Live report the officer is believed to be somewhere in the mountains of either Kogaluye and Boyer Ahmad province or Khuzestan province. This is incredibly rugged, remote terrain in southwestern Iran. As of this morning, the WSO has reportedly made intermittent contact through an encrypted radio device, which tells military officials he's alive and following survival and evasion protocols. That's encouraging, but the situation is extremely dangerous.
And I understand the initial rescue effort itself ran into serious trouble?
It did. CBS News reported that 2 hydrogen hydride 60 Whiskey Pavehawk rescue helicopters took Iranian ground fire during the extraction of the pilot. Both helicopters made it back to base, but several U.S. personnel on board were injured. That gives you a sense of just how contested this airspace really is down low. In a notable move, Israel has reportedly paused its own airstrikes in specific southwestern sectors to clear the airspace for American rescue teams.
There's also been an Iranian bounty placed on this missing officer, right?
That's right. Iranian state media has broadcast a reward of 10 billion Iranian tomans, which works out to roughly $60,000 US. They're calling on civilians and nomadic tribesmen in the area to capture what they're calling the enemy pilot alive. There was briefly a scare when a group calling themselves the Sons of Haidar al-Qarrar posted a video claiming they had the airmen in custody. But fact-checkers at BBC Verify and Snopes debunked that footage pretty quickly, confirming it was actually from a 2025 incident in Pakistan.
So misinformation is already complicating things on top of everything else. Let's talk about what's happening beyond this search. The strikes have been expanding, haven't they?
Significantly. Al Jazeera reports the campaign has moved well past purely military targets into critical Iranian infrastructure. U.S. and Israeli forces struck the city of Karaj, destroying the B-1 suspension bridge. Photos from the West Asian news agency confirmed the bridge collapsed, and that strike reportedly killed 8 people. Al Jazeera and the Times of Israel also report hits on 2 petrochemical plants in Khuzestan province, and a strike on the Bushehr nuclear site that killed at least 1 person. There have also been targets struck in Tehran and Beirut.
How is the White House framing all of this, especially after losing 2 aircraft in one day?
President Trump has been downplaying the setbacks. He said the war is, quote, nearing completion, end quote, and that the U.S. has, quote, decimated, end quote, Iran's capabilities. He's also threatened to target Iran's power plants if negotiations don't move forward. So the rhetoric from the top remains very aggressive, despite what was clearly a difficult day for American forces yesterday.
And what's the Pentagon saying specifically about control of the airspace?
This is where it gets really interesting. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and I should note that title was renamed from Secretary of Defense back in 2025, maintains that U.S. forces hold what he calls uncontested control of Iranian airspace. According to Defense.gov, the Pentagon's argument is that the successful deep rescue of the Strike Eagle pilot actually proves Iran's integrated air defense system is shattered. Their logic is that if American rescue helicopters can fly that far into Iran and come back, the air defenses must be broken.
But not everyone agrees with that assessment?
Not at all. The Washington Post and Air and Space Forces magazine have both pushed back hard. Independent analysts make a pretty straightforward point. If control were truly uncontested, American planes shouldn't be getting shot down, and rescue helicopters shouldn't be taking hits from ground forces. Experts suggest Iran is effectively using mobile shoot-and-scoot air defense batteries that have survived the more than 13,000 U.S. sorties flown so far. So there's a real gap between the official narrative and what military analysts are seeing on the ground.
Let's zoom out for a moment. This war started with the assassination of Iran's supreme leader on February 28th. What's the broader geopolitical picture 5 weeks in?
The ripple effects have been enormous. The Strait of Hormuz has essentially been closed, and global energy prices have skyrocketed as a result. Iran's new leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the slain supreme leader Ali Khamenei, has reportedly rejected a U.S. proposal for a 48-hour ceasefire, according to Iran's Fars news agency. So there's no diplomatic off-ramp visible right now. The international community is watching this with growing alarm, and the economic consequences are being felt well beyond the region.
There are also some serious legal questions being raised about how this campaign is being conducted.
There are, and they're significant. Just Security and Amnesty International have both flagged concerns that targeting civilian energy infrastructure could cross legal lines. There's particular scrutiny of what's being described as a double-tap strike on that Karaj bridge, which may constitute a war crime under international law. The Iranian Red Crescent Society has submitted 16 formal letters to the International Criminal Court demanding an investigation. A UN fact-finding mission is currently active, but the U.S. has preemptively imposed sanctions on ICC officials to deter any formal prosecution of American or Israeli personnel.
What are the overall costs of this conflict so far, both in equipment and in lives?
The numbers are sobering. As of today, the U.S. has lost an estimated $3 billion in aircraft alone. That includes 16 Reaper drones and now the 2 manned jets from yesterday. 13 American service members have been killed since the war began 5 weeks ago, and roughly 300 have been wounded. Those figures will likely increase if the search for the missing weapons systems officer turns into a prolonged operation in hostile territory.
And that search remains the immediate focus this morning?
Absolutely. Everything right now is centered on getting that weapons systems officer home. The fact that there's been intermittent radio contact is a hopeful sign. But with Iranian forces actively hunting, a bounty on the officer's head, and rescue helicopters already taking fire, this is about as high stakes as it gets. The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical.
Ethan, thank you for walking us through all of that. We'll, of course, stay on this story as it develops. Still ahead, we've got one more story to get to this morning. We turn now to our second story this morning, and it's a big one. 2 wildfires are still burning across Southern California after erupting yesterday during a powerful Santa Ana wind event. Chloe has been following this all weekend. Chloe, bring us up to speed on where things stand right now.
Good morning, Grace. So we're tracking 2 fires here, the Springs Fire in Riverside County and the Crown Fire out in Los Angeles County. Both ignited yesterday morning, just minutes apart actually, and both exploded under those brutal wind gusts. The Los Angeles Times and Cal Fire report the Springs Fire has now scorched over 4,176 acres, which works out to roughly 6.5 square miles. The Crown Fire is smaller at about 345 acres, but it caused real panic in the community of Acton when flames got within 100 feet of homes.
Let's start with the Springs Fire, since that's clearly the larger one. How did it grow so fast?
It's honestly staggering when you look at the timeline. It started just before 11 a.m. yesterday on Gilman Springs Road near Moreno Valley, and within the first hour, it jumped from 50 acres to over 1,000. The Guardian reported wind gusts between 50 and 70 miles per hour were just pushing that fire across the landscape. By last night, it had quadrupled in size. Containment is sitting at 25% as of this evening, so crews have made progress, but there's still a lot of active fire line to manage.
With that kind of speed, I'd imagine homes were in serious danger. What's the damage looking like?
This is actually one of the more remarkable parts of the story. Despite how fast this fire moved, no primary residences have been lost and no injuries have been reported. Firefighters threw everything they had at protecting the Rancho Bellagio development, which was right in the fire's path. We're talking 2 air tankers and 2 helicopters making massive retardant drops to shield homes and nearby schools. The overnight hours helped too, because the winds started to taper and crews were able to slow the forward progress significantly.
What about evacuations? Are people still out of their homes?
Many are, yes. Mandatory evacuation orders went out for several zones in the Moreno Valley area yesterday. The National Weather Service's wind advisory expired at 1 p.m. today, and after that, authorities began a phased process of lifting orders for areas south of John F. Kennedy Drive, but not everyone's been cleared to go back yet. Valley View High School is still operating as an evacuation center. They've also set up animal shelters, with livestock going to San Jacinto Animal Shelter and smaller pets heading to Moreno Valley Animal Services. And Moreno Valley College had to shut down both yesterday and today because of hazardous air quality.
That's a lot of disruption. What kind of firefighting resources are on the ground right now?
More than 260 personnel and 36 fire engines are working the line. Gilman Springs Road is completely closed from Alessandro Road to Bridge Street, just to accommodate all of that equipment and crew staging. It's a significant operation, and fire officials expect crews to stay on site through the entire weekend for mop-up, and to reinforce containment lines in case the winds shift.
Now let's talk about the Crown Fire in LA County. You mentioned flames got dangerously close to homes there.
Right, so the Crown Fire broke out at 11:23 a.m. yesterday, near the intersection of North Crown Valley and Soledad Canyon Roads in Acton. ABC News and KRE11 reported it burned about 345 acres. 4 homes were initially threatened, and the flames came terrifyingly close to some of those structures. But the actual damage was limited to 1 outbuilding that was destroyed. Containment is at 26% now, and the key detail here is that forward progress has been completely stopped. Mandatory evacuations in Acton were lifted last night, though warnings remain in place for 1 zone.
Was there any impact on transit in the area?
There was. Metrolink's Antelope Valley line was briefly suspended because of the fire's proximity to the tracks. That's a commuter line a lot of people depend on. The good news is, service has since resumed, so that disruption was relatively short-lived compared to what we're seeing in Riverside County.
So both fires started within minutes of each other during the same wind event. What made conditions so extreme yesterday?
Meteorologists and fire officials cited by NPR and The Guardian are calling this the first major Santa Ana wind event of the spring, and it hit a landscape that was already a tinderbox. There had been a recent heat wave that dried out what fire scientists call flashy fuels. These are fine vegetation, like dry grasses, pine needles, and light brush. They're technically known as one-hour fuels because they respond almost immediately to changes in humidity and wind. They have a high surface area to volume ratio, so a single spark can ignite them, and then the flames jump to heavier timber from there.
And the humidity played a role too?
Absolutely. The National Weather Service noted that humidity levels dropped to between 10 and 15%. That's extremely dry. And the critical thing is that moisture didn't recover overnight, the way it sometimes does when temperatures fall. So the fires stayed active through the night, even without the peak wind gusts. That's part of why these fires were so hard to get ahead of in those first several hours.
There's already a lot of attention on Southern California Edison. What's the story there?
This is shaping up to be a major controversy. CBS News reports that Southern California Edison did not implement what are called public safety power shutoffs in either the Moreno Valley or Acton areas before the fire started. That's despite active high wind warnings and gusts reaching 70 miles per hour. These shutoffs exist specifically to prevent energized power lines from sparking fires during dangerous wind events. The fact that Edison kept the lines live under those conditions is raising a lot of eyebrows.
Has the utility said anything publicly about that decision?
Not that we've seen as of tonight. The cause of both fires is still officially under investigation. Investigators haven't ruled out utility infrastructure failure, but they also haven't ruled out other human causes, like dragging trailer chains or discarded cigarettes. Under California Public Utilities Commission regulations, utilities have to file what's called an electric safety incident report within 24 to 48 hours if their equipment is suspected of involvement. No such report has been made public yet.
So what happens next on the regulatory side?
The Los Angeles Times noted that the decision to keep power lines energized during extreme winds is expected to be a primary focus of the CPUC's Safety and Enforcement Division. People are already drawing comparisons to previous litigation, including the 2025 Eaton fire, where utilities faced liability for failing to de-energize lines. In fire investigations like this, there's a legal distinction between human negligence and what's called an act of nature, which is a legal term for something unavoidable like a lightning strike. If investigators determine that utility equipment played a role, Edison could be looking at significant liability.
Looking ahead to the rest of the weekend, what should people in the area be prepared for?
Vigilance is the word officials keep using. The high wind advisories have expired, which is good news, but the National Weather Service warns that an ongoing easterly flow is going to keep humidity low through tonight. That means any new ignitions could still spread rapidly, even without the kind of extreme gusts we saw yesterday. Fire crews plan to stay on site through the weekend, reinforcing containment lines and doing mop-up work. For residents who've been allowed back home, the message is to stay alert and be ready to leave again quickly if conditions change.
It sounds like the next 12 to 24 hours are still critical, even though the worst of the wind has passed.
That's exactly right. 25 and 26% containment means there's still a lot of uncontrolled perimeter on both fires. One unexpected wind shift or a spot fire jumping a containment line could change the situation quickly. The good news is that the forecasted winds for the rest of the weekend are much calmer than what we saw yesterday. But until those containment numbers climb higher, nobody in fire operations is letting their guard down.
Chloe, thank you for walking us through all of that. We'll check back with you as the situation develops.
Thanks, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In the halls of justice, the airwaves are finally clearing up after a federal judge turned the volume down on a controversial executive order. United States District Judge Randolph Moss ruled on March 31, 2026, that a 2025 directive intended to defund NPR and PBS was unconstitutional. The judge described the effort to end taxpayer subsidization of biased media as a textbook case of viewpoint discrimination that used federal funding to retaliate against news organizations for their editorial content. While this ruling hits the pause button on First Amendment violations, it is not quite music to everyone's ears. The decision does not restore the $1.1 billion in appropriations that Congress already rescinded last July, a move that has already forced the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to go off the air. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson called it a ridiculous ruling by an activist judge and signaled an intent to appeal, while NPR CEO Catherine Marr celebrated the verdict as a clear win for an independent press. Parties must now submit a joint status report by April 15th to determine the next frequency for this litigation. Turning to global health, the administration is making a viral impact of a different kind. Reports indicate the White House is withholding a significant portion of the nearly $6 billion in global HIV and AIDS funding mandated by Congress for fiscal year 2026. The State Department is reportedly slow-walking the cash as they transition to an America First global health strategy, prioritizing bilateral deals and recipient self-reliance. It seems the administration is keeping its purse strings tight, as only $2.9 billion of the previous year's $6 billion reached its destination. The fiscal year 2027 budget proposal looks even leaner, seeking to slash global health programs by an additional $4.3 billion. Stakeholders, including the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, are worried about a bitter pill to swallow, mass layoffs, and clinic shutdowns. Meanwhile, over 100 civil society organizations are crying foul over a leaked plan to potentially leverage health funding in Zambia to secure a critical minerals deal. In a shakeup that has the Department of Justice feeling a bit of a Bondi crisis, President Trump ousted Attorney General Pam Bondi on April 2, 2026. Her 14-month tenure came to a screeching halt after the president reportedly grew tired of her inability to secure convictions against political rivals. It seems the case for Bondi was closed following bipartisan frustration over her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files and her unverified claims of a client list. As Bondi prepares to transition into the private sector, Todd Blanche, a former personal defense lawyer for the president, is stepping up as acting attorney general. This departure follows a mass exodus of over 5,500 career employees, leaving key divisions decimated. Lee Zeldin, the current EPA administrator, may be the next to enter the legal fray as a potential permanent successor. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is looking to put some muscle back into the wellness economy. He is moving to overturn a 2023 FDA restriction that prohibited compounding pharmacies from producing 19 specific peptide drugs. By reclassifying 14 of these substances, including popular compounds like BPC 157, Kennedy aims to end what he calls the war on peptides. While wellness enthusiasts are feeling a surge of energy at the news, former FDA officials are concerned the move bypasses vital safety protocols and clinical trials. This policy shift is expected to be a shot in the arm for telehealth firms like Hims & Hers, though the scientific community remains worried about the potential for adverse reactions in this unregulated gray market. Finally, on the hardwood, we are seeing a full-court press for history. South Carolina and UCLA have punched their tickets to the 2026 NCAA Women's Basketball Championship game after a thrilling night in Phoenix. South Carolina ended UConn's 54-game winning streak with a 62-48 victory, led by 16 points and 11 rebounds from Tania Latson. In the other semifinal, UCLA secured a 51-44 win over Texas to reach their first-ever NCAA title game. It was a net gain for Lauren Betts, who also notched a double-double. The championship showdown tips off this Sunday, April 5th, at 3:30 in the afternoon at the Mortgage Matchup Center, where South Carolina will look to cement a modern dynasty. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.